Translator, Ninetales. Editor Dark Gem. Chinmu, Old Blind, inclined their heads in silent accord. Though Granny C possessed a beauty capable of toppling cities, she had never treated that beauty as a blade to wound the world. On the contrary, she understood too well how lethal her appearance could be, and thus would willingly conceal it, disguising herself in ugliness whenever she faced others. Yet Cult Master Lee walked an entirely different path. The former cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult harbored a heart twisted like withered vines. His love for Granny C had reached a distorted extremity. He envied her beauty so fiercely that he yearned to become her. Moreover, his comprehension of the great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures diverged from Chinmu's. Though Chinmu had received the very same tome, the very same instruction upon Woodcutter's Rock, and had cultivated the identical unity technique, he had grown beneath the watchful eyes of the villagers since childhood. Even if his temperament bore a trace of stubborn defiance, his spine remained straight and upright. Chinmu's unity technique was rooted in the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique, its foundation orthodox and dignified. Spells and divine arts that others labeled as devilish were, in his hands, performed with a righteous bearing. Cult Master Lai's unity technique, however, carried a sinister current, its aura steeped in the shadowed impression of the devil path. Nor would Cult Master Lai ever allow herself to endure grievance by cloaking that beauty in ugliness. Instead, she would parade it boldly, unleashing calamity upon all living beings beneath heaven. The old cult master had never concerned himself with tales of smiles that overturn cities and glances that topple kingdoms. Chinmu returned to Granny Sai's chamber and gathered every beast hide she had collected. One by one he stowed them into his teoti sack, preparing against unforeseen peril. Old Ma and Blind likewise readied their belongings. Blind's possessions were simple: a bamboo cane and a copper 8 divinatory emblem hanging from a fortune-teller's banner. Old Ma, however, carefully wrapped the memorial tablets of his wife and children. After pressing a tender kiss upon them, he placed them securely within his bundle. Clad in a green Buddhist robe, he resembled a wandering monk who had traversed countless tribulations. Granny C's Tao heart still wavered at times. Erupting without warning, Old Ma could suppress Cult Master Lee's will within her, and Blind stood ready should that suppression prove insufficient. If necessary, Blind would wound Cult Master Lee's consciousness, while Chinmu would take responsibility for treating the old woman's injuries. They stepped beyond the village boundary, and Granny C laughed at herself. I still require your protection, and even Mu'er must lend his strength. Yet with me as the former saintess of the devil cult and old Rulai as a Buddha, will he truly extend a helping hand? Old Ma's expression remained unmoved. Old Rulai will aid you. Cult Master Lee once stood as the previous cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult, equal in seniority to old Rulai. Subduing devils accrues merit to a Buddha, and subduing a great devil such as Cult Master Lee would benefit his cultivation. Moreover, Buddhas sacrificing themselves to nurture devils is no uncommon tale. Chinmu spoke with unease. I fear that when they subdue Cult Master Lee, they may subdue Granny as well. Old Rulai will not. Old Ma shook his head. He walks his own path, holds fast to his own principles and practice. At his level of cultivation, he need not consciously guard his precepts. His actions will never stray beyond them. That is what true practice is. Chinmu found himself inwardly astonished. Old Ma bore deep resentment toward old Rulai, yet his words carried unmistakable respect. It was not merely because old Rulai had once been his master. There must be something within that old monk that commanded reverence. What troubles me, Blind lifted his head slightly, is whether old Rulai possesses the strength to suppress Cult Master Lee. This old devil once stood on equal footing with him. Silence followed. Among the 3 sacred grounds of the martial world stood Tao Sect, Great Thunderclap Monastery, and Heavenly Devil Cult. As former cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult, Cult Master Lee had been a towering figure of the martial realm, matched only by old Rulai. If old Rulai intended to refine him, it would be no simple feat. Great Thunderclap Monastery lies at the border between Great Ruins and Eternal Peace Empire, Old Ma said. Legend claims that the god Broken Mountain Range was cleaved apart by a god's blade, forming a natural chasm between Great Ruins and Eternal Peace. Great Thunderclap Monastery holds a similar legend, though with an added tale. When the god's blade descended and neared Mount Meru, monks sat upon the mountain in meditation. They filled its slopes and vowed to live and die with Mount Meru. Moved by their sincerity, the god diverted his strike around the sacred peak. All other mountain ranges were severed. Only Mount Meru remained untouched. Blind smiled faintly. I suspect someone stood above Mount Meru, else that god would not have cared in the slightest for the monks' lives. Mount Meru stood at the border of Great Ruins and Eternal Peace Empire. One face gazed toward the Empire, the other toward Great Ruins. The sacred mountain lay far from Eternal Border and Secret Waters, yet not distant from Qingmen Pass along the northern frontier, merely 4,000 to 5,000 miles. From disabled elderly village to Mount Meru spanned 30,000 miles. Qinmu moved far slower than Granny Sai, Old Ma, and Blind. Thus, they required 6 to 7 days to arrive. The nights within Great Ruins brimmed with peril, so they could only hasten their steps by day. For that reason, their journey took longer than it would have elsewhere. Were they to fly, they could arrive in 2 days, yet Qinmu's cultivation lacked such strength. If he ran at full power, they would need halt every 100 miles for him to recover his vital qi. Therefore, traveling on foot proved wiser. Qinmu brought along the dragon Qilin as transport. The beast barely matched Old Ma and the others in speed, so they need not slow their pace for his sake. By the first evening, they reached an ancient temple, desolate and abandoned. Strange beasts lurked within, yet they paid them no heed, lazily sprawled beside a statue of the Heavenly King. Mu'er, come, pay your respects. Blind withdrew several incense sticks and beckoned Qinmu. The old and the young stepped before the Heavenly King's statue, inserted the incense into the cracked censer, retreated 3 paces, and prayed in unison. This little one hails from disabled elderly village beside the river. Passing by your temple, we request to rest here briefly. Should we have disturbed the master of this land, we beg forgiveness. Since youth, this little one's kidneys have been weak and body frail. His primordial yang has long since dissipated. Ugh! Granny C groaned, then added angrily, Blind, you have taught Mu'er poorly. Blind laughed. Granny C, you may not fear being plucked, but we do. If you doubt, ask Mu'er whether the prayers I taught him were effective. Qinmu nodded vigorously. They work. When Xianqinger heard my prayer, she didn't pluck me. Granny C was torn between laughter and tears. She summoned Mu'er. Come. Help me cook. When he approached, she whispered, Blind is full of crooked ideas. Do not learn from him too much. Night descended, and the Heavenly King's temple lay silent. Beyond the dragon Qilin's snores, no sound stirred. Old Ma sat upright like a Buddha in meditation. Blind leaned against the wall, head lowered, bamboo cane in hand. Qinmu, unlike them, had spread dried grass into 2 beds, and Granny C lay beside him. In the dead of night, the clang of gongs and drums burst forth from outside. Instantly, all within the temple grew alert. Qinmu sat upright and peered into darkness. The temple candles flickered dimly, yet the gongs and drums grew ever nearer. Blind and Old Ma moved to stand beside Qinmu and Granny C. Old Ma gestured for silence. The sound advanced until it halted before the temple. Deep voices rang out. Silence! Challenge! Several god statues strode into the temple clad in worn armor. Though the stone figures were dilapidated, they moved like living deities. Qinmu even caught the stench of decay from them. The statues stood imposing, and behind them lined 100 white skeleton soldiers clutching broken weapons in perfect formation. Some bore gongs and drums in skeletal hands. Others carried banners emblazoned with the words Silence and Challenge. The stone statues entered. The skeletons remained outside. Qinmu's eyes widened at the absurd spectacle. The dragon Qilin had also awakened, yawning drowsily. A human voice issued from one god statue, addressing the Heavenly King's statue within the hall. Reporting to Sea Suppression Heavenly King, East Sea Dragon King Ao Zhen exploits the natural disaster to rebel. His Majesty has issued orders from Carefree Village, commanding me to assist Sea Suppression Heavenly King in slaying the rebel. The dragon Qilin lay beneath the Heavenly King's statue, still muddled and unaware. At that moment, the towering Heavenly King statue stirred. The 8 flags behind it fluttered. Stone trembled. Then it rose to its feet, awe-inspiring and majestic. For 20,000 years this calamity has plagued us. And he still dares rebel! Bring me my blade! From behind the temple rang the resounding cry of steel leaving sheath. A green dragon crescent blade, 30 yards long, burst from the earth and flew forth. The heavenly king seized it. The blade hummed. "Where is my steed?" the statue thundered. The dragon Killin suddenly felt weight descend upon him as the statue sat astride his back. His body lifted uncontrollably, soaring from the temple. He heard the booming proclamation from above. "Guard this place. I shall return after slaying him." Before he could resist, he became a streak of flame and vanished into the night, bearing the heavenly king. Rather than carrying the statue, it felt as though the statue carried him. Within the temple, Chin Mu, Granny C, Blind, and Old Ma stood stunned, speechless for a long while. Time passed, perhaps until dawn approached. Suddenly, a dragon's roar split the air. With a tremendous crash, a dragon's head fell from the night sky, tumbling twice in the temple courtyard. Chin Mu looked sharply, yet it was carved of stone. Dragon roars echoed without cease as the heavenly king statue returned astride the dragon Qilin. He dismounted, resumed his seat upon the lotus platform, placed the green dragon crescent blade beside him, and declared, "Inform his majesty that by fortune this general accomplished the mission and severed the rebel's head." The stone statues turned and marched into darkness with their skeletal army. The gongs and drums faded away. Soon after, roosters crowed. Darkness retreated. Dawn light poured into the temple. Chin Mu shook his head. The night had resembled an uncanny dream. He looked at the dragon Qilin, still dazed. "Fatty dragon, how are you?" "I dreamed," the dragon Qilin muttered. "I carried a god king wreathed in blazing flames. We charged into a battlefield above a roaring sea. Countless divine dragons attacked me, but all fell beneath the blade of that god king. I bore him into the depths, slew dragon gods, severed a dragon king's head, and returned with it." The dream felt utterly real. Chin Mu glanced at Blind and Old Ma, then asked softly, "Grandpa Blind, was what happened last night real?" Blind and Old Ma shook their heads. "Who can say what is real within great ruins? Let us press onward. Reaching Great Thunderclap Monastery matters most." Chin Mu gazed at the heavenly king statue, unease stirring within. He stepped forward and touched the stone. It was icy cold, no flesh nor blood. His Majesty sent orders from Carefree Village. "From Carefree Village?" Chin Mu murmured, expression complex. "Where exactly is Carefree Village?" Translator, Ninetales. Editor, Dark Gem. Chin Mu fixed his gaze upon the green dragon crescent blade clasped within the palms of the heavenly king's god statue, and discerned at once that this treasured saber was no mere carving of stone, but true steel, cold and real. When they had first stepped into the temple hall, Chin Mu had already swept his surroundings with careful eyes. He remembered with absolute clarity that the heavenly king's statue had held no blade in its grasp, much less a colossal green dragon crescent blade of such imposing presence. What astonished him even more was that faint smears of blood clung to the blade's edge. As Chin Mu extended his hand, intending to test whether that blood was still fresh, Blind's bamboo cane flicked up and nudged his wrist aside. A radiant smile rested upon Blind's face as he said, "Muir, curb that curiosity of yours, lest it cost you your life." Chin Mu shuddered, and the memory of the darkness he had traversed with village chief surged back to him. A single droplet of devil blood had withered every plant within 100-yard radius in the blink of an eye. If the blood upon the green dragon crescent blade was genuine, then the bizarre events of last night must have been real as well. That would mean the heavenly king's statue had truly slain the East Sea Dragon King, and the stains upon the blade were none other than the Dragon King's blood. Blind seemed to have pierced through Chin Mu's thoughts and spoke in a low voice. "Divine blades possess spirit. Do not provoke them without care." Chin Mu smiled faintly. "I am not Grandpa Cripple. I would not dare commit such a brazen deed as stealing the heavenly king's divine blade. I only wish to collect the blood upon it. This is the blood of the Dragon King among divine dragons. It may well serve in refining potent medicine." Blind chuckled in praise. Muir remains the thrifty one of the household, ever mindful of gathering wealth. Chin Mu produced a jade vial, and with utmost caution, drew that single drop of Dragon King's blood from the green dragon crescent blade into the bottle, then sealed it tightly. Within the courtyard of the Heavenly King's temple, A massive dragon's head sculpted of stone had smashed into the earth, gouging out a vast crater. Upon the shattered fragments, streaks of blood gleamed in a vivid crimson sheen. Chinmu retrieved a box and transformed his vital chi tread into sword chi. With meticulous control, he scraped the bloodstains from the stone into the box. When he reached the neck of the dragon's head, he saw that it had been severed with immaculate precision. It appeared as though an incomparably sharp blade had cleaved it from the body in a single stroke. From that smooth cross-section, Chinmu could almost envision how tyrannical and swift that blade must have been. Though the dragon's head was but a statue of stone, he could still sense within that cut an overwhelming and peerless knife intent, a realm embodied in steel. If I were to sit here and contemplate this section of the dragon's head, I might comprehend an overbearing knife technique not inferior to Grandpa Butcher's pig-slaughtering knife skill. Yet there is no time. We must press on. A trace of regret stirred in Chinmu's heart. If he could grasp the divine realm contained within that knife skill, the knife intent, and knife domain, then the mere aura alone would be enough to terrify countless foes into trembling. Old Ma urged him, "Muir, time to depart." Chinmu hastened to rejoin the others and beckoned the dragon Chilin over to mount. The dragon Chilin had served as the heavenly king's steed throughout the entire night. Its body was weary and sore to the core. The moment Chinmu leapt onto its back, it let out a shrill squeal like a pig at slaughter. Chinmu immediately sprang down, and the dragon Chilin complained, "I must have been possessed to be ridden by a stone statue the whole night. Elder Blind, since you divine fortunes, can you also expel spirits?" Blind shook his head. "I am no specialist in that art. I tell fortunes, and occasionally perform an exorcism. I cannot dispel this for you. Fear not, you will recover after a night's rest." The dragon Chilin remained only half convinced. After they journeyed several thousand miles northward, the land gradually sloped downward. Chinmu turned his head and realized they had descended from several mountain ranges, a sight that left him perplexed. Granny C explained, "This region resembles a basin, so it appears as though towering mountains encircle it. In truth, beyond them lie the plains from which we first entered. This basin is in fact exceedingly vast." They surveyed their surroundings. The towering peaks, dense forests, deep ravines, and yawning chasms scattered across the basin. The terrain here differed markedly from other parts of the great ruins. The basin was immensely broad. As Chinmu and the others passed a foothill, they spotted clusters of red coral branching outward, dazzling as rubies. Granny Sai plucked a piece of red coral, intending to fashion it into a hairpin, when suddenly a strange beast lunged toward them. It resembled an enormous lobster, yet its body spanned 3 yards in length, with 8 legs and a pair of pincers that it swung menacingly at them. "Lunch has presented itself," Blind exclaimed in delight. At midday, Chinmu roasted the strange beast, and its fragrance wafted richly through the air. Golden tamale oozed with grease, intensifying everyone's appetite. Old Ma had fasted for a long while. This time, he too ate to his fill, leaving only the lobster's shell upon the ground. Chinmu was puzzled. Why would such a strange beast dwell here? There is no water in sight. As he spoke, the lowing of cows echoed from afar, and the forest trembled. Several fish monsters, having caught the scent of roasted flesh, emerged from the woods. Their upper bodies resembled fish and stretched 20 yards long, while their lower halves bore 6 sturdy legs. This group of strange beasts mooed like cattle. Chinmu turned toward the sound and saw the fish monsters charging forward as though they were flying. Their legs appeared evolved from fins, covered in massive scales of incomparable hardness. As they moved, thousands of scales glittered like mirrors reflecting the sun's rays. There is no need for needless slaughter once our bellies are full. Old Ma released his aura, and the fish monsters fled in terror. His aura was astonishing. Not only did it drive away the cow-like fish monsters, it also startled the birds hidden within the forest. When Chinmu lifted his head, he beheld a flock of fish that had grown wings soaring into the distance. He opened his green heaven's eyes to observe further, and saw dark silhouettes shifting atop distant mountain peaks. Several colossal octopi, each bearing 8 tentacles, shrank their massive heads and withdrew into their territories, not daring to provoke them. One octopus, in fright, expelled a cloud of black ink that blanketed 7 hectares, turning that region of air pitch black. The four continued onward and encountered several fishmen, creatures with fish heads and human bodies, clutching pitchforks as they hunted. What a bizarre place, Blind muttered. Chin Mu had dwelled in the Great Ruins since childhood. He had witnessed such peculiar beings from a young age, and thus believed fish and prawns to naturally roam about on land. At first, he had been mildly surprised, but he soon dismissed it. Blind and Granny C, however, had not always lived here. They knew well how fish and prawns appeared beyond this region, and thus found the sight deeply strange. Granny C scanned the surroundings and murmured, "This place must once have been a vast sea, wrought with magical creation. When the sea vanished, the beings within it could only crawl upon dry land and alter their habits and abilities, yet these changes seem rather excessive." Blind also felt it outrageous, but the dragon Qilin spoke first. "I seem to have been here before." Chinmu was startled, yet smiled nonetheless. "You and Patriarch came here previously?" The dragon Qilin shook his head. "No, I mean the god rode me here last night." Before long, they arrived at a village inhabited by the abandoned people of the Great Ruins. The villagers appeared bewildered, uncertain of what to do. Chinmu stepped forward to inquire, and an elder said, "Countless Dragon King temples within hundreds of miles were destroyed last night. Many Dragon Kings worshipped in those temples had their heads severed. We customarily offer sacrifices at their temples to pray for favorable weather. Now that they are destroyed, everyone is at a loss." Chinmu was deeply shocked and immediately pressed for details. "Yesterday, a great storm raged, rudely waking the entire village. When we went outside, it was pitch black, and above our houses hung water. That water floated overhead, yet did not fall." Chinmu was stunned. Water suspended above rooftops? The roar of waves was thunderous, and light shimmered within the water overhead. Many even saw dragons. It was as if a vast sea hung in the sky, where slaughter unfolded. I saw lightning streaking endlessly, only ceasing at dawn. After daybreak, the water in the sky vanished. Only the trees seemed drenched, their crowns brimming with water. We then discovered many temples in ruins. Those residing within said they saw stone statues of divine dragons flying out. Chinmu's eyes widened. Stone statues of divine dragons flying out? A monk from Divine Dragon Valley claimed he saw a heavenly king bearing a blade and riding a plump beast. He barged in and slew the Divine Dragon King in Divine Dragon Valley, departing with its head. After gathering all the information, Chinmu returned to Blind, Old Ma, and Granny C and relayed what he had learned. They stared at one another, speechless. This matter was far too bizarre. What had transpired last night felt both real and illusory. Stone statues issuing decrees in the darkness, the Heavenly King's god statue wielding a blade to behead dragon kings, the dragon Qilin serving as steed throughout the night. The abandoned people even spoke of a sea suspended in the heavens, and Dragon King heads severed. If these events were woven together, then last night's happenings could only have been real. That stone statue which issued the decree last night claimed His Majesty had sent it from Carefree Village. The crux lies there. An ancient voice emerged from Granny C's mouth. "I think. Amitabha!" Old Ma transformed into a colossal Buddha to suppress Granny C's heart. At the same moment, Blind moved to bind Granny C in place. The two were tense, but ultimately managed to subdue her devilish nature. Chinmu wiped the cold sweat from his brow and urged, "Let us go! Let us go! We must reach Great Thunderclap Monastery swiftly to prevent Cult Master Li from emerging to wreak havoc." They hastened onward and soon arrived at Divine Dragon Valley. Countless divine dragon sculptures encircled a vast lake, and at its center stood a statue of a dragon king. Many of the divine dragon statues had collapsed, each appearing to have been cleaved down by a single strike. The Dragon King's statue in the lake stood headless, its neck severed cleanly, its head nowhere to be found. "My heavens!" Granny C gradually regained clarity and moaned at the sight. "This region of the Great Ruins is too mysterious. Are these stone statues merely idols, or have they become living gods? I truly cannot comprehend." "Amitabha!" Buddha light radiated from Old Ma's body. A monk in white robes flew forth from between his brows, and in a flash entered Granny C's brow, suppressing her once more. With a grim expression, Old Ma said, "We cannot tarry." I cannot suppress him much longer. Cult Master Lee's primordial spirit is merging at an astonishing rate with Granny Sai. Her cultivation has already broken through into the life and death realm. If we delay further, they will soon fuse completely, and Cult Master Lai will seize this body and make it his own. Blind asked gravely, "How long can you hold him?" Old Ma shook his head. "For now, I can still restrain him, but if I exert too much force, I may damage Granny's mind." Blind said resolutely, "Hurry,